Thank you guys all so much for coming out tonight. I'm really glad to see that people care enough about our democracy to show up to a town hall with their state representative. For those of you who I don't know, I'm actually Aune, obviously. I'm the state representative for the 14th district. We are currently in the new 14th district. We went through a redistricting year this year, so the lines have changed. And we'll kind of show you what that map looks like in a second. But I just want to welcome everyone, and again, thank you for being here and giving some of your time to our state level government, finding out what's going on and how it affects you and in the Northland. I want to kind of introduce myself a little bit so you all know kind of what my background is and why I'm here. So I am serving my first term in the Missouri legislature. I ran for office for the first time in 2020. And I'm running for re-election again this year. We serve 2-year terms in the Missouri House. We have 8-year term limits in the House and 8-year term limits in the state Senate as well. So legislators can only spend 8 years in each chamber if they so choose and if they can get elected to each. I am a member of the super minority in our state legislature as a Democrat. So there are 163 legislators in the state of Missouri. Of those, there are 49 Democrats, and I am proudly one of them. We had a really interesting year in the legislature this year. It was very fraught, and I'm sure a lot of you saw some headlines, and may have some questions about what went on and what didn't go on. One of the things that I'd like to share is some of what I do in the Missouri legislature. I serve on 4 different committees. I serve on the Special Committee for Small Business. I serve on Downsizing State Government. I serve on a Rules Committee, which is legislative oversight, and I'm the ranking minority member on the Emerging Issues Committee. So I hear all sorts of proposed legislation down in the State House. And I get to work with my colleagues every day down there and figure out, how we can make bad policy better and how we can, do some good for the people of Missouri. I really see that as my role. I have had such an incredible time representing the 14th district over the last 2 years, I guess a year and a half. It has been just the honor of a lifetime. The Northland is such an incredible place to live and to raise a family and to work and to play. And it's really fantastic being able to brag to my colleagues in the legislature about how fantastic my district is and how great my constituents are. So a little bit of credit goes to you all for that, so thank you. And like I said, this year in the legislature was pretty tough. We actually passed a record low number of bills this year. I would say that our state government, in the legislature at least, is pretty dysfunctional right now and has been for the past few years. And that's been really interesting to see firsthand. It's one of the reasons I ran for office, because I was afraid that our state level government wasn't as effective as I wanted it to be. So I got down there and saw just how ineffective it is. But there's a lot of work to do, honestly, and I feel really strongly that it takes people who really care about the state and who are really willing to do the work to go down there and do that. So that's what I'm trying to do as your state representative. I hope I've been able to represent all of you well over the last year and a half, and I hope to continue doing so in the future. Another one thing I forgot to mention is I also serve on the Missouri Military Preparedness and Enhancement Commission, which is a commission that was set up originally to make Missouri really just the best possible state in our country for active duty and retired military and their families. One of the things we focus on are ways that we can enact policy that makes sure that military families feel welcomed in our state, that their kids feel welcomed in our state, that they have the resources they need to do, to live a fantastic lives and hopefully retire here and stay here even after their time in the military is over. So that's another thing I'm really proud of. I have such an incredible opportunity to learn more about our state and what we do for our military families. In my other roles on my other committees, I've learned so many things about the challenges facing other communities, not just ours. and all the things that we can do to address those. So it's been a fantastic learning experience, and I'm going to try to keep going. So what you have in front of you hopefully is a legislative review handout that looks like this. If you don't have one, Annie will bring one in for you. So we put this together as a little take-home, something you can kind of follow along at your seat as well. And this kind of just goes over what I would consider some legislative wins and some legislative concerns of the session, as well as some of the budget items that are going to be affecting our area in Kansas City, and opportunities to see an even larger, more comprehensive budget overview. So I'll just start at the beginning, and I'm going to go over a few of these. I'm not going to go through line by line, but if anything comes up in here that you've got a question about, feel free to stick your hand up if I've skipped over something, and I'll just kind of go over what I would consider some legislative successes this year. One of the biggest things that I think that folks in our community really care about, and you said it at the polls 2 years ago, but Medicaid expansion. When we passed that in our at the ballot in 2020, there were some pretty serious threats about not funding the program within our budget process. The budget chair, Cody Smith, has been really against Medicaid expansion, and he's been trying to cut funding for it and make sure it doesn't get funded, and that it just exists in our Constitution with no money behind it. He has failed at that. So I'm happy to report that we have funded Medicaid expansion in our state this year in our state budget, and that's a really big win, I believe, for Missourians who are stuck in between that area of qualifying for health care and not being able to afford it. We've got to make sure folks have access to quality health care across our state. And not only that, it's not even just about people, because we've seen rural hospitals closing all across our state in record numbers over the past several years. And Medicaid dollars coming into our state make sure not only that folks are receiving care, but that our rural hospitals are staying open and can continue to provide that care to folks. So the other big win, I would say, would be student transportation. In the past, we have not fully funded student transportation in this state. I'm not certain if you all are aware, but there are, I may get this wrong, but I want to say close to a quarter of Missouri public schools are on a 4-day school week right now, because largely because of budget issues around transportation, not being able to run buses 5 days a week. So student transportation, that line item has been fully funded in our budget this year, which is a huge win. Teacher pay, we're addressing the starting salary for teachers in Missouri because it has been embarrassingly low. We've been at the very bottom of teacher pay across all the states. I think we're typically around 48 or 49 every time that list comes out, which has been just abysmal. We're lucky here in the Northland. We have fantastic schools, as you all know. Our starting teacher salary is higher in our area because cost of living is higher in our area, but the base start teacher pay across the state of Missouri is a really good place to start. I don't think it's going to solve all of our teacher retention and acquisition problems. I think that we are in for a really long, difficult road in terms of recruiting and retaining really qualified educators. With just the climate around public education recently. So I think that this is a step in the right direction, and I'm really excited to see that we're prioritizing our educators. Another thing that people were really passionate about this year was charter school funding and closing what was considered to be a sort of a funding gap. Previously, the way charter schools were funded is money would come out of public schools budgets, the public school budget. And that has pitted charter school parents against public school parents in this state in a really, really frustrating way. Because at the end of the day, we want all of our kids to be educated. And St. Louis City looks a lot different than Kansas City does in terms of our public school system. St. Louis Public School, they've been really struggling. I believe 44% of their students are in charter schools over there. And so we want to make sure that kids in St. Louis who don't feel they have a public school option that fits them and meets their needs do have options, opportunities to get a quality education, to have that education funded. And the way we've done it in this new bill, which I'm going to give all the credit in the world to my friends in the Senate, specifically Senator Doug Beck. He worked on this piece of legislation and he changed it so that when we fund our charter schools, that money isn't pulling from public schools any longer. It's pulling from the general revenue of our state budget. It's no longer pitting parent against parent, and I think that's a huge win for charter schools. There is a little concern. This bill actually increases some oversight on charter schools, which I think is really great as well. There are some kind of oversight pieces to it that I think are going to help us make sure that we see what's going on and have a clear line of vision into where our charter schools are going and what they're doing and how they're operating. But you know, I think overall, making sure that we're funding our kids' education is just so paramount. So I consider that a win. We also, one thing that is important to Kansas City, which we're going to hear hopefully next week if we won the FIFA World Cup, but we did pass a clean tax exemption bill that is required by FIFA for any state or any city that wants to host the World Cup. It would essentially make the admission, so the tickets to the World Cup would be tax exempt. It does not tax exempt anything around what would happen during the World Cup. And the reason that this concession was willing to be made by folks in the legislature, because in a supermajority of Republicans, you can imagine that tax breaks like this and cutting things like this they get really concerned about it, and they weren't really certain if they felt they could trust it. But what we know is that the World Cup would be like 7 Super Bowls in terms of revenue for our area. They say that it's not just Kansas City that's going to see revenue from food and hotels and transportation, all of that. It's 80 miles radius outside of Kansas City. That's huge. I mean, we're talking all the way out to Saline County. You know, I mean, so many parts of our state will benefit from this. So if we can attract them with passing a clean tax exemption bill, man, I hope that goes a long way, because that would be such a huge boon for our city. There are some economic development pieces in here. One of the things that I'm really proud that Missouri did this year is that we created an opportunity for mothers who are incarcerated to give birth in prison and stay with their newborns by creating prison nurseries and funding those. One thing that was really powerful in the House this year is I have a colleague, Kimberly Ann Collins, who was born in a prison, and to a mother who was incarcerated, and she wasn't able to spend any time with her mother after she was born. And it's stories like that that honestly are one of the reasons that I think that we should be in Jeff City making policy to help people. But hearing firsthand from a lawmaker her experience with the criminal justice system and our correction system and her parents' interactions with those, that was really, really powerful. And that we did something about that this year in the state of Missouri. I'm so proud of us. As a member of the super minority, I don't always get to say that I'm proud of the legislation that we pass here. So my heart's really happy about this one. I think that this is, folks on the other side of the aisle like to talk a lot about being a pro-life state. And I think that this is one of the ways that we can make Missouri an even more pro-life state, because we are supporting lives that are born here. So some other legislative wins, in my opinion, are some bills that didn't pass. And I'll go through some of those. Some of what didn't pass was the fuel tax repeal. So last spring, we passed a fuel tax here in Missouri. We still have one of the lowest fuel tax in the country. That's how far behind we were and how far behind MoDOT is in terms of revenue. So we had some folks in the legislature this year fighting to repeal that gas tax. and we were able to keep that at bay because MoDOT genuinely needs this money. They need this revenue. You all drive on our roads, so I'm sure that you are feeling it too, and especially in places across the state. You know, we're lucky here in Kansas City. We have funding for infrastructure where, for instance, the Buck O'Neill Bridge, that was a partnership between MoDOT and the city. Funds from both places were able to make that happen. And not all municipalities across the state have that kind of revenue. And MoDOT really relies on the fuel tax to fund their work. And what we've been hearing from MoDOT for years is that all they're able to do right now is just keep up repairs. They can't even proactively take on big new projects. They're just trying to keep up with fixing the stuff that breaks, and they're just so far behind. So in my opinion, it's a win. Now, that said, I also know what gas prices look like right now, and I know that defending a new gas tax in this environment is it's tough. And I also fill my car up with gas, so I feel it too. One of the things that, you know, I've seen other, I believe Biden proposed recently a fuel tax break or something like that, you know, on a national level, which I think is interesting. What I would say is Missouri needs the revenue, and we are still, like I said, one of the lowest states for gas taxes in the country. And so I think that where we got up to last year is still just trying to barely keep pace with what other states are doing. So a few other things that didn't pass would be, we had a bill that would basically create a legal cause of action to sue your employer if they forced you to get the COVID vaccine and you suffered a negative reaction to it. So that is something that I typically leave bills like that up to the attorneys in the room, because you know, they have a much better understanding of what this actually looks like in a courtroom. So in terms of how you would even, you know, go about finding that information from employers. There was a lot of debate on it, and in the end, it didn't end up passing. And I'm pretty glad about that for a lot of reasons, but mostly because Missouri business owners have been up against it already for the last few years. I'm really proud. I found out today that the Missouri Chamber has included me in their legislative, I think, business champions for supporting Missouri businesses. I'm really proud of that because I'm a small business owner myself, and it's really important that we support the folks who are creating jobs, you know, in our community. Those are small business owners and entrepreneurs and people who are creating something out of nothing, and, you know, putting more hardships on them after, you know, as we're still coming out of a pandemic and economic hardships, I think would be a mistake in this climate. A few other things that were concerning, they tried to cut the maximum number of weeks of unemployment benefits in Missouri, and it would be a tiered approach essentially. Missouri already does not, I believe, in my opinion, provide folks who are facing unemployment with enough benefits as is. Last year we saw, and we're still seeing, our state made some major mistakes when they doled out unemployment benefits, and they have been trying to claw back cash from folks who suffered through unemployment during the pandemic. They're trying to ask for that money back, and it is egregious. So in that climate, to go in and try to reduce those benefits further, that really upset me, and I'm really glad that it didn't pass. Another really egregious bill that I can't not mention is what was called the Make Murder Legal Act, which is essentially stand your ground on steroids. It would basically allow folks to stand their ground and murder with no consequences. And it is that's another one of those bills where after I spoke with some of my colleagues who have been prosecutors and also defense attorneys, they were, their heads were spinning about this bill. How do we prosecute that? What does that look like? How do we determine that in a courtroom? How does a jury determine that? I think I've used this word a few times tonight. It's egregious. It's egregious. I'm so disappointed when I see bills like this filed, and I'm always thrilled when we defeat them and they don't pass. We also had a few social issues that were focused on, in my opinion, too much in the legislature. One of those issues was attacks on trans kids. There are two bills that didn't pass. One would prevent trans girls from participating in sports on a girls' team in their school, and another would prevent parents from providing health care to their trans child. And as someone who sits on my side of the aisle, I have a lot of opinions about supporting folks in the LGBTQIA community. I am an ally, and I get to serve in the legislature with some of the coolest gay and bisexual people I've ever met. So I do feel it is my job to defend folks when these attacks happen. That said, these are issues that affect so few Missourians. The fact that the supermajority forced us to fight about this issue so loudly and so often this year is so disappointing, because Missourians are facing economic hardships, they're facing unemployment, their families are struggling, and we want to focus on an issue that affects a handful of families in this state. It's smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned, and I will keep fighting for kids to be able to just be kids, but I just don't think it's the issue that is affecting families in the Northland when they sit at the kitchen table at night and talk about what's going on in their community. So a few other things that were pretty social wedge issues I would consider would be the Parents' Bill of Rights and censoring history, which is what the other side of the aisle calls CRT. It's been in the news a lot, but they're trying to make it so that we can't really talk to kids as we're educating them about things like social class and privilege and racial disparities, things like that. It is really disappointing every time this conversation comes up, because we actually passed a really fantastic bill this year that requires our students, I believe in 4th through 6th grade, to recognize Holocaust Education Week, and to recognize that in the classroom by participating in certain activities. To me, how can the Missouri legislature stand behind a bill like that? That is so important, because we know that kids these days don't understand the full effects of the Holocaust and really what those consequences were. A lot of data shows that. A lot of data shows that kids just don't understand or don't know. So we need to make sure that they have that knowledge, that education, so we don't repeat history. And so to pass a bill like that and then propose a bill that would censor us from talking about these issues in other areas, it just doesn't gel with me. It doesn't make sense. I can't figure that out, and I'm still asking a lot of questions of my colleagues to help me get to the bottom of it. But also didn't pass this year, which I think is good for Missouri. Some of the legislative concerns that I have are, in terms of what passed, we passed a voter ID bill this year, which is something that Democrats have been fighting against, especially folks in communities of color have been fighting very loudly against. Unfortunately, if any of you have tried to get a driver's license in the last 10 years, or a state ID, and been missing a document or not been able to get a hold of your birth certificate or something like that, the hoops that you have to jump through. It's really difficult. It can take time away. It can take money. it can take resources that a lot of folks just don't have. And so unfortunately, the voter ID bill passed. I do anticipate there being challenges in the courts because every time a voter ID bill passes, that's typically what happens. So we'll just see where that goes. There have been some environmental regulation concerns that passed. The advanced recycling bill basically creates chemical byproducts from recycling certain materials, and we've expanded what folks are allowed to recycle and how they're allowed to do it. So that is disappointing to me. I don't think that that is moving our state or our country in the right direction in terms of making sure that it's a safe place for our kids to grow up. The congressional redistricting map, for those of you who were paying attention this year, that was the biggest drama in the legislature. In the Senate, we have a conservative caucus comprised of 7 men who spent all session filibustering and obstructing legislation because they wanted a 7-1 map in Missouri. Even though in 2020, Missouri only went 60-40 for Trump, which means we're about 60-40, but they wanted a 7-1 map to represent us, with 7 Republicans and 1 Democrat, and that is ridiculous to me. We already have 2 Democrats at the national level in the House of Representatives, and frankly, I believe that the numbers show we should have a 5-3 map, but that's a pipe dream in this state. So we ended up passing a map on the last week of session, and it was a 6-2 map. It's not the map that I wanted. It's not the map that I hoped for, but it could have been so much worse, which is the story of our lives down there sometimes. It protected Congressman Cleaver's seat, which this side of the state is pretty happy about. It did some funny stuff in the 1st and 2nd congressional districts on the other side of the state, which when people have incentive, political incentive, to do one thing or another on a map, it turns out they do it. And we saw folks in the Senate who are running for higher office, or who have friends running for higher office, who wanted to stack the deck in their favor. And that's what that fight was. So I'm happy to say we passed a map, and that's what I'll say about that. The other 2 things that are concerns of mine are the Kansas City police funding. So, and that's something that has come up a lot with constituents over the last year and a half, and it's something I talk to folks a lot about. When you walked in, there's some literature out there from the Kansas City Police Department, some firearm locks. So if anyone wants to take one home, if any of you have a neighbor who you think might need one, or a friend, even if it doesn't go to your house, if you could use it, please take one. They're free, they're from KCPD, they're great. I have a fantastic relationship with the Kansas City Police Department. I am so grateful for their partnership, and I think they do a fantastic job of keeping our community safe. The concern I have is that we are the only police department in the state that doesn't have local control. So we've been seeing over the last few years some legislation that would even further remove local control from our police department by basically tying the hands of our local leaders. Last summer, I believe, we saw our mayor try to pull a budget maneuver where he pulled funding, pulled part of the KCPD budget from one place and moved it to another place, and he got, as you all probably saw, a lot of pushback on that. That's what these bills are aiming to do. The SJR, the KC Police Funding, SJR 38, that is going to put something on the ballot this fall for us to vote on. I believe that it is it's an unfunded it's going to be an unfunded mandate, but they passed a bill to try to fix that, which is the one below it, SB 678, and they are really just trying to wrestle that control back with the state. They do not want our mayor to make these decisions. They don't want our city council to make these decisions. They want to make it at a state level. And however you feel about where our police funding goes, I feel very firmly that local control of law enforcement is really important. I believe that if you're going to police a community, you should live in that community, you should understand that community, and having a police board of commissioners that meets in Jeff City and may not really care a whole lot about what's happening here in our city, I don't think that that's the most effective way to do it. I think that the folks who we elected to do that, our mayor and our city council members, I think that in our legislators, our county legislators, and our state legislators, I think we all have our roles, but I think that our city should be able to determine what our law enforcement does and how they're funded, because they know what we need best. And they have those close relationships with our law enforcement as well. So those are some concerns about legislation that passed. And there are some other bills that I was really hoping that would pass that didn't. So that's my other legislative concerns. We had a chance to extend postpartum care for mothers under Missouri Medicaid, our Medicaid program, and we didn't do that. And I'm really upset about that, honestly. It was a really small thing we could have done to help moms in our state, and we didn't. The Missouri Non-Discrimination Act that has been filed for a couple decades now, it would put into statute that you cannot discriminate against someone based on their sexual orientation or gender orientation in terms of employment, housing, things like that. There was a case in the Supreme Court that on a federal level truly does protect LGBTQIA folks that I believe would still make sure that folks aren't getting discriminated against here in the state. But there are other things like housing and things like that that people can still be discriminated against. And I just think that, you know what, it's high time we just put this into statute and make sure we're treating everyone fairly. Recreational marijuana didn't pass, although we will likely see it on the ballot this fall in a completely different form. Sports gambling didn't pass, which if anyone here cares about sports or cares about the casino industry at all, Argosy Casino is in my district here in the 14th, and they have been very pro sports gambling for a long time. They have plans as soon as we pass that in this state. They are ready to just get up and running. It would be such a huge revenue generator for our state as well. And we haven't done it. And the reason for that is there is a small group of legislators who insist on tying legalizing sports betting to also legalizing what are called VLTs, video lottery terminals. These are those things that you see in gas stations that are like little casino games. So they're not legal in Missouri, but a lot of folks have them. They're trying to make them legal, and they're tying these bills together and not letting them pass if they're separate. And it's because I assume getting some money and some campaign donations from the VLT industry. So that's really disappointing. It would bring a lot of revenue to our area, jobs to our area. Argosy is a big employer here in the 14th. And you know, anything that has to do with casinos is something that's always kind of something I pay attention to. So that's kind of the end of that list of legislative wins and concerns. The next page has some Kansas City specific budget items that are, I think, pretty exciting. We had a record budget this year from federal funds coming in and other things. We were able to invest a lot of money in a lot of really good programs. We didn't get everything we wanted, but man, we got some really good stuff. So I'll let you all look through this yourself. One of the things that I do want to call out that I'm really excited about, and I'm going to give credit to Senator Lauren Arthur for, we got $5 million for KCI to invest in attracting international routes to our airport. And that is something that was asked of us as legislators just a few months ago. I think it was into the legislative session already that we realized this was a need. And once we learned how important that is and how important this investment would be to our area and to our constituents to be able to have direct international flights from Kansas City, Lauren Arthur went to work on the budget and she secured that money, $5 million, and that's huge. And that's going to be really great for our new airport. It's going to be great for folks in Kansas City to be able to travel, and I'm thrilled about that. So there's also a little budget breakdown in here. You can see kind of where our revenue estimate is. If any of you want to see a comprehensive budget report, we have, and I'm going to brag real quick, the Democratic Party in the House has an amazing staff, and our budget staff member, her name is Casey, she put together an incredibly comprehensive budget report, 73 pages long. If you scan this little thing here on this last page, you can view the budget. It's available online. It is very comprehensive. It has every budget item, anything that you could possibly care about. It's a fantastic resource. I really encourage you to take a look at it if you have questions. And I think that is honestly really all I had to talk at you about. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. If you have any questions that you wrote down, I had some cards on the table if you'd like to do that. I know Annie has a few. But I'm more than happy to answer anything.
Ashley, do you have a breakdown of the new redistricting? So
Yes, great question. So I didn't even touch this, did I? Here's the agenda for today.
Yeah, on date, 6.
Wait, there it is. Okay. So here is what the maps look like. On the left, this is the current 14th district. So it goes from Tiffany Springs all the way down to the river. Includes Riverside, Northmore, Platte Woods. I've got that one little cutout on the right. That's my only precinct in Clay County. And then we got Platte Woods, Lake Wacomas, all those areas. The new district, which is kind of confusing because I will serve this district until the end of my term. Everyone in this district is my constituent right now and until January. But I am currently in a race to represent the folks in that district, which is about 50% of the current 14th district. You can see it extended all the way up there. So we are now in the 14th. It's all the way up to the highway, and we've got like just east of the airport. The southern part of my district is really what I lost. I lost Riverside, a lot of Parkville, Northmore, Platte Woods, but I gained Weatherby Lake over here, which is the most populated area that I gained. So the lines are just really different now. The southern part of my district is a brand new district that was created in Platte County. So that's another really exciting thing in Platte. We have grown so much. It is so crazy. There are 2 districts in the state that had like the highest growth. One was in St. Charles County and the other one was mine. I grew by 25% this year, or in the last 10 years, which is so exciting. We have so many people moving into Platte County. We have so many people specifically moving into Southern Platte. And I mean, you all can see the development. You can all see the construction and all the apartments and homes being built. It's really exciting. And it really just shows, how popular and what a wonderful community this is. So because of that, we gained a whole new legislative seat in Platte County. So right now, there are only 2 elected officials on the state level in the House in Platte. It's myself and Sean Pouchet. Afterwards, after redistricting, so starting next year, there will be the 14th district, the new 12th district, and Sean Pouchet's district, which is the 13th. And that now, he lost some space to the new 12th district, and he now has a much more rural district that goes up into Buchanan County and the rural parts of Platte. So, yeah.
So is Lake Wacomas still in your district?
Lake Wacomas is still in my district, yes.
Yay. Maybe we might have lost.
No, it's hard. Yeah, the line's really thick in that one. Yeah. No, I still got Lake Wacomas.
Platte Woods is out of that.
Platte Woods is now out of it. It will be in the new 12th district. Yeah. So, but, here's what I will say about that. one of the coolest things about being in the legislature, one of the coolest things I've learned is that the Northland legislators, the folks that the Northland voters have voted into office, are really good, decent people. And we work really well together, no matter what side of the aisle we're on. You know, on the right side, we've got Chris Brown and Doug Ritchie and Sean Pouchet, Senator Luke DeMeyer. On the left, there's myself and Maggie Nurenburn, Senator Lauren Arthur, Representative Wes Rogers, Mark Ellebrock. You know, we all can sit at a table together and have good policy conversations that aren't combative, that don't represent everything you see on cable news every night about how Democrats and Republicans talk to each other. And I'm just so proud of that. I'm really proud that Senator Luke DeMeyer and I filed legislation together this year to help veterans. I'm really proud that you know, Senator Arthur worked with her Republican colleagues in the Senate to secure money for KCI. These are the things that give me hope about Missouri, about our democracy, about where we're going, because there is civility in politics here in the Northland. And I genuinely believe that no matter who you're represented by up here, you're gonna be in pretty good hands. And that said, even if I'm not your representative next year, but I am still in the House, just call me, I'll help you. I don't care where you live. I'll help someone in St. Louis if they ask me to, so that's what Annie's here for. Anyone else? Yeah?
What specific efforts or successes were made on downsizing the state government?
I'm so glad you asked.
See a lot of money being spent.
Right,
You're
so
kind of proud of.
what's interesting is the Committee to Downsize State Government typically increases state government, but in terms of the bills we pass through there. It's been a really interesting experience. There have been a lot of ways we've done some things to try to deregulate certain things. Now here's something I will say. A lot of what we talked about in downsizing state government this year and bills that would downsize state government didn't pass this year. And that's because a lot of bills didn't pass this year. To give you an idea, in 1994, we passed around, you could probably dive in here, but I mean, we used to pass 1 to 200 bills a session. 200 bills, yeah. We passed 44 this year. Now that said, our bills are now omnibus bills, which just people put their language in and just stack them. So a lot of language does get passed, but not in the same way. So in terms of downsizing state government, we took a few stabs at limiting regulations on what municipalities can do, how they regulate small businesses starting up, and especially small businesses in the home. We passed, Annie, help me remember, did the sandbox bill pass? The regulatory sandbox? Take a look at that. I think it did. So there's a bill that went through that I'm a big fan of. It's colloquially called a regulatory sandbox, but what it does is if you are a company in Missouri and you are innovating something and you want to, for the purposes of this innovation, operate outside of current regulations because you've got an idea that you really think is going to go somewhere, but you've got some state regulations tying you down. We worked on a piece of legislation this year that would create what's called a regulatory sandbox, where they go play in the sandbox where the regulations are a little bit different. It still has a lot of oversight. Those regulatory bodies that typically regulate these companies, they have a seat at the table. They're seeing what's going on, and they will pull the plug if something goes outside of the bounds of what's okay. But I think that is a fantastic opportunity to just take some reins off of businesses, right? And to allow entrepreneurs to, play a little bit. I mean, I know that sounds kind of, it's a sandbox, so the metaphor works, but it's an exciting opportunity to allow business owners to try something new. Annie, have you been able to confirm if it passed or not? Not yet. Okay. If it didn't, I will champion it next year. I know the legislator who carried that bill will likely file it again. I think it's a good piece of legislation. It had mixed support on my side of the aisle. My side of the aisle likes to make sure that people are operating within the bounds of the law and they're being regulated for people's safety and all of that. And I absolutely feel that way. But when we're talking about innovating and having an opportunity to make Missouri a place where entrepreneurs want to be, I think that's a step in the right direction. So
I think that's proven many times is reducing that regulatory burden.
Right. Exactly.
Very successful in spurring innovation.
Absolutely.
I guess one of the things last year, I think it was last year, some work on cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And that kind of did get a lot of support at the state level.
Yeah, no, actually I passed a bill last year.
On that?
Yes, so yes and no. So I passed a bill last year, which was shocking to even me. But I worked with my colleague, Bill Hardwick, who is a Republican from Pulaski County. And he and I came together at the beginning of the session last year and decided we do not know a whole lot about what Missouri's doing in terms of securing our cyber infrastructure. And we had a lot of questions. So we started asking those questions and realizing there was a lot of opportunity to learn more and to better understand and have the people who are doing this work day in and day out in Missouri at the state level to know more about what's going on across the state. So we passed the Missouri Cybersecurity Act, which creates a commission of folks from across the state. Public employees, private sector employees, experts in cybersecurity, stakeholders from across the state, like the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, our military installations, and our municipalities, essentially, to be able to figure out what are best practices, what is working, what are our biggest threats, how can we address those threats? Are there any ways we can enact policy around this that would make our state more secure? So we passed that bill last year. I'm incredibly proud that it passed, and the governor signed it. Unfortunately, the governor has not appointed anyone to that commission. And I've speculated as to why. I think the biggest reason as to why is last year our governor made an enormous mistake, I believe, in accusing a journalist of hacking the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's website. That did not happen. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education had a really egregious error on their website that this reporter just found. I was very critical of the way he handled that situation, and I was very public about my criticism. And after that, he has decided not to appoint anyone to my commission. So that is really unfortunate because we still don't know what we don't know. We passed a bill a year ago, and we still don't have any more information than we did the day I stepped into the legislature. Cybersecurity is a huge passion of mine. My husband actually works in the industry, and it's something that I understand is a growing threat and an area of expertise that is lacking among lawmakers. Not many of my colleagues really understand what that threat looks like and how we can even start to go about solving it. And so I'm fully committed to continuing to fight that fight and to get that commission filled and to answer the questions that we have. One of the things we saw last spring is Park Hill had a ransomware attack and they were down for 2 days. So to me, not only are our kids that's suffering even more learning loss when they shouldn't have to suffer more learning loss, it interrupts our educators, it interrupts our administrators. That's taxpayer money that is completely lost with 2 days of education missing. But on top of that, they have to respond to this attack, which means they go to a private company and they pay a lot of money to have services provided to them. That can't be the most efficient way we do it, right? We can't be piecemealing every single school district around the state, just contracting this work when they think they need it, because they need it right now, whether they know it or not. Cybersecurity should be a proactive effort. It should not be a reactive effort. And one of the things that I have my eye on that I'm really looking to is ways that we can consolidate some of our cybersecurity for things like our public schools, or making sure that our smaller municipalities know what they need. Even just an education program across the state for folks. Like, there's so many things we're looking into right now, and I'm really hoping to dig into some more cybersecurity policy next year, and working across the aisle to do it, because if the bill only has my name on it, it doesn't move. So, anything else? Sharon?
Well, this is, I don't know, is it called the Ethics Commission?
The Missouri Ethics Commission?
Unfounded, it's functional because they're running up, and now they're pretty heavy, and they're the ones that are supposed to check ethics of that office holders, right?
Correct.
But it's not a balanced committee.
No, it's now a partisan committee, unfortunately. It's now a partisan committee. So what happened is the Missouri Ethics Commission, they are charged with making sure our ethics are tip top here in Missouri, in terms of lawmakers and specifically like campaign finance, things like that. They were short a commissioner for a while this year. They didn't have a quorum, so they couldn't meet to investigate any ethics complaints, of which there are some. So the governor finally appointed someone, and it is a hyper-partisan far right-wing appointee, which skews the Ethics Commission far to the right, and that's really disappointing. It is, but it's also pretty much par for the course in Missouri, as you know. And those are the things that we fight against. Those are the things that as a member of the super minority, we struggle with, and we try to make sure things are balanced. And what I will say about going back to how few bills were passed this year is that it is absolutely a symptom of the dysfunction that we see down there. Republicans have been in charge for 20 years now, and they're still fighting amongst themselves and unable to govern. They're unable to pass laws. They're unable to even have a discussion in the Senate without filibustering each other and yelling and wearing overalls and reading books into a microphone for hours on hours. That's not how our government should work, in my opinion. I wasn't sent to Jeff City to obstruct everything. I was sent there to make life better for Missourians. And I might be on one side of the aisle, but my work happens across the spectrum. I work with Republicans all day, every day. I have fantastic relations with them to make sure that we do work that makes everyone happy. Consensus is what our government is about. It's what democracy is about. And right now we're not finding consensus. We're just finding obstruction. So it's been tough to be in that kind of environment down there, but we're slowly chipping away and hoping to make some more progress. So. Anything else?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
A Medicaid bill was passed for Medicaid funding,
Mm-hmm.
but then the bill to undo it failed, so explain that to me. Did
Yes.
you vote, and then now we're gonna give, because the people voted for that.
Correct.
Just like the animal rights bill.
Yep.
Republicans did.
Yes.
The legislature just decided, oh, you people don't know what you know.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So let me explain. So that is confusing. So what happened is these were budget bills. So and appropriations bills kind of operate a little bit differently than the other legislation that is filed and passed through the House. So what happened is in 2020, we added Medicaid expansion to our Constitution. that's what the voters did, and there's nothing lawmakers could do about it, except not fund the program.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's like, we're not doing it.
Exactly. So what they tried to do this year, they came back and said, all right, we're still fighting this because we're mad we lost, I guess. And so they filed a bill to remove funding essentially to prevent funding from Medicaid. Not only did we not pass that bill, we did pass an appropriations bill that fully funded it. So that's why you see I didn't pass and I did pass. But yes, so in our appropriations bill, we fully funded it because that's what the voters asked us to do.
The Missouri legislature is an embarrassment.
I couldn't
mean,
agree
it's
more.
just, I don't know, it's like a bunch of hillbillies.
It's tough.
When you have situations like that, shouldn't the original bill also include the funding portion of it when it's being put before the voters, so that nobody can end run?
Yes, so that was the biggest complaint about the ballot initiative regarding Medicaid expansion, is that it didn't fund Medicaid expansion. That is actually, I believe, it speaks to our initiative petition process in our state, which is something that we're actually actively trying to protect because Republicans are trying to make it so that voters can't put or have a lot harder time putting initiatives on the ballot up for vote of the people. What we, let me go back, sorry. What we pass with Medicaid expansion, and when we pass something, typically that language is written by, we don't know who, right? It could be an out-of-state interest. In this case, Medicaid expansion, I will be wrong if I guess who wrote that language exactly, but because a ballot initiative doesn't go through a typical legislative process, right? So when someone proposes a bill in the House of Representatives in Missouri, you have to ask the speaker to refer it to a committee. And then if it gets referred to a committee, you have to present it to you have to get the committee chair to bring it up. And then if the committee chair brings it up, you have to propose it to the committee, answer questions, bring in witnesses, all of it, defend it. If it passes through that committee, it might go to the floor. If it gets referred to the floor, it might come up for debate, right? There's so many stopgaps. There's so many opportunities for input and for change and for consensus. When someone writes something and gets a bunch of signatures to put it on a ballot, that language remains untouched. It is the language that is written. It does not go through that process. So mistakes can be made. And candidly, I feel I have some concerns about what we're going to see on the ballot this fall for legalizing recreational marijuana. I believe that the folks who wrote that language are self-interested, and while I do believe that recreational marijuana passing is what's right for Missouri for a lot of reasons, a big one is revenue. Another one is that it's going to happen anyway. I don't know that what's going to be put in front of voters this fall is the right choice, unfortunately, but it might pass. And so when it does pass, if it does pass, then your lawmakers are stuck enacting that law. And so that's kind of where that struggle is, right? So is the language correct on the ballot? Not always. And you know how hard it is to change language in the Missouri Constitution? It's hard. You need 2/3 of lawmakers to make changes, and in this climate, man, it's tough. It's tough. Yes?
What do you think is going to happen with the police funding constitutional amendment?
If I had to guess, it'll pass. I think that in Kansas City, our fight should be not necessarily in the weeds about where our budget dollars are going right now for the police department, because that's being controlled by somebody else. I think our fight should really continue being demanding local control over our police department. I believe in funding our law enforcement. You will never hear me say that we should defund the police. Our law enforcement officers are up against so much every single day. They have so much required of them. They deal with folks who are mentally ill. They deal with folks who are facing homelessness. They are social workers with a badge and a gun sometimes. And I think that is asking too much of them. And I would love to see more money going into our police departments. I would love to see more resources and folks being funded to do local policing so that folks who are being policed in their neighborhoods are being policed by people who look and live like them. So they're not feeling like it's an us versus them situation. I think we have a lot of room for improvement with our policing, as I think every police department does. But I think we should have local control over that. And I think that it's incredibly disappointing that the state continues to wield their power because they view Kansas City as a liberal, left-leaning, dangerous, crime-riddled community. Yes. Yeah, Ken.
On that same issue, it hasn't been that long ago that St. Louis was able to regain control of their police department. What did they do right, or what are we doing wrong, or do you have any insight on how they got it done?
That's a great question. David, do you have any insight on that?
Not really.
When did that
I
happen?
think Kansas City blew it then. We should have insisted on being
Being
included
both,
with it.
yeah.
I think St. Louis I think that may have been right after Ferguson, and that was kind of
A reaction,
to that.
yeah.
And Kansas City wasn't ready to ask for it too, and so they left them out.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I think that probably is right. And right now that we have seen the issues escalate in policing, especially in the media, I think we have even less of a chance of getting that done.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to characterize it as defund police.
Exactly.
Which has nothing to do with that.
Exactly. I believe that Republicans in our state are pretty dug in on the issue, and we're going to keep seeing things like this. What I say I have a lot of conversations with the KCPD, and I want to know how I can support them legislatively, of course. And one of the things I just constantly go back to is like, listen, I want you guys to have the funds that you need. I want you to have the resources you need, and I will continue to fight for those things. If we have to do it on the local level, we have to do it on the local level, or we can do it on the local level, great, but we can't. So we're forced in this system that we're in, and I think it's incumbent upon folks in positions like mine to work with our city council members and our mayor and keep those lines of communication open. Because one of the things I will say about that before we wrap up is last year when the mayor did that budget maneuver, what he did is he didn't include any Northland city council members in that decision. In fact, he cut all of them out.
That
And-
wasn't by.
Yeah.
Yeah, you thought about that.
Yeah, no, that was by design and it was on purpose. And I have a lot of respect for our mayor, but I don't think that was the right choice. And I can tell you that our city council members were very upset about it as well. And we can do better as a city. We can. I really think we can, and I think we can do better as a state. I just like to see a little bit more cooperation, I think. But
I guess along those lines, not just about the police, but that's not an isolated incident. The Northland is given the second shift up here in Kansas City, Missouri, behemoth.
right.
And until
Yeah.
being slapped around a little bit myself, but we appreciate your efforts in having us live in harmony.
Well, listen, the Northland is an incredible, incredible place to live. It really is. I mean, you all know that. And one of the things that folks here are always concerned about is public safety. It is making sure our neighborhoods are safe, and that KCPD does have a presence up here. And I think that that's another concern that we see. If we see the mayor pulling funding from our police, are we going to see even fewer patrols up in the Northland? Because we already don't see a lot. I will say this though, all the conversations I have with KCPD, they do remind me that the reason we see fewer patrols up here is because we have less violent crime up here. They are constantly being called out of the Northland to deal with stuff south of the river. what we have going on up here is typically traffic violations and personal property crime. Not that that's not important, but when they've got shootings south of the river, we understand they have to triage using the resources they have. So again, we just need to get them more resources and support them in everything they do. So if there are no other questions, I just want to thank you all again for coming out. I'm so grateful for the time you spent here tonight, and please feel free to take any more information on your way out. If there's anything that my office can ever do for you, I'm happy to help. Annie is my legislative assistant in the Capitol, and she is always happy to answer your questions or answer the phone or respond to an email. So thank you all again.